Okay, good. Excellent. Welcome, everybody, to our April Talking Tech. We are I know, that's what my problem was, like, April already? Oh my goodness. So we are very excited to have Professor Elaine Venter here from Kennesaw State University. And as you can see, she is going to be discussing the future of AI and fiction in video games, which I think is going to be a fascinating topic. Please make sure also to join us next month. May is May already Jurassic? Oh my goodness. So our May topic, our book club is reading Jurassic Park, and after the book club meets at 2 o'clock, we will be having a paleontologist come talk to us about technology and paleontology related to Jurassic Park. So that'll be a fun one as well. So without further ado, you didn't come here to listen to me. Let me hand it off to our guest.
Hi, everyone. Oh, thank you. I usually have a very loud voice, so I'm trying to modulate it with a microphone here now as I'm augmented by technology. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Becca, and thank you for having me here. As Becca said, I am a professor at Kennesaw State University. I have a doctorate in media studies, which just means that I found a way to actually play video games and watch movies and TV shows and make it for research. And my mother kind of realized what I did too late. She's like, oh, what did you do? And now I'm at speaking events, so she can't say it's not really for kids anymore. We're getting there with her. In terms of AI, I will be honest, I come from a sociological perspective and a lot of my technology interests, so I'm not necessarily having degrees in science and whatnot, but it's interesting when the humanist sociologists come in and say, we want to look at this stuff too, because they're very important human questions about technology that we have to ask as well. And I'm obsessed with video games, so that's just how it is. Ever since I was a kid, I saw the the original stuff that I played with as a kid back then. I was so excited. And so it's been fantastic to bring these kinds of obsessions together to ask bigger questions about what that means for us. And some people might say, well, video games, is that really that important? Well, yeah, when it comes to me being a media studies professional, we look at our stories. Our stories tell us who we are, what we're about. They're a fantastic look into different generations as well, about what was important for us, who was in charge, who wasn't in charge. And video games is a way in which we share the mythos of what it is to be human, even when the stories aren't about, well, humans. So I'm going to start off this talk about one of my favorite video games, actually. That's not to say that it's perfect, no video game is, but one of my favorite video games is Mass Effect. Yeah, there we go. We have some fans here. So Mass Effect 1-1-3. I have a 100% rating on my achievement score. It's a little flex there, mind you, because the people who know, they know what that takes. But beyond that, it is a video game about a human character, and there's augmented technology in there, which is very fascinating. But at the end of the day, it comes down to this relationship between humans and AI, artificial intelligence, and I loved it when I went back then. I saw computers in media, and of course they had all the AI. And you look at a lot of that board, and after a while, I think you begin to notice a very interesting trend. Most of the AI are out to kill us. I mean, that's how it is, right? And that's actually no different in this particular video game, except it's complicated. We have the Geth, who are, well, this is Legion, but Geth, who are this hive mind of artificial intelligence. And then you have EDI, which was created by a fascist group that actually wanted to save humans by using AI to do that. And then you have the actual Reapers. I know, I like to add a little drama in there, okay? Did it work? Did it scare you? Get a little tingle? There, yeah, you should be afraid of them. They're very odd. They're actually a organic machine race. I'm sorry, by the way, spoilers, and I would like to think, though, that the statution of spoilers at this point is past for this game at this point. So if you haven't played it, though, I'm giving everything away to you. Because the Reapers come out, they hide, and then every couple thousand years they pop out. Hello, everybody. How have you advanced as a civilization, right? Is there AI? Cool. We don't want that. Essentially, they were actually created by a particular civilization. Nobody knows who, but the whole idea was they found that AI would advance too far and destroy organic life. And their whole thing is to create balance in the universe and prevent that, essentially, is what we're getting to. And so when you play the game and you play all 3 iterations, you get to 3 choices that you can make, because obviously this is all the choice we get in life. You can either choose control, which is you become, you take control of the geth. And you essentially, well, everybody just essentially becomes that very organic computer, but in control aspect. It's seen as a more negative option, if you will. And then, of course, you can also just destroy the heck out of them and say, nope, goodbye, we don't want to deal with any of this. In so doing, though, you destroy all other machine and AI life. So, Edie and Legion, say goodbye. I know. I couldn't, please don't ask me what choices I made, because I will cry about it, essentially, all right? And then the last one you actually have is an interesting choice. And when we discuss AI, and what we discuss is true AI, right? There's actually different kinds of AI, and we'll talk about this. But in terms of what we see in media oftenly portrayed is this intelligent artificial life that becomes so human and lifelike, will take over us. There's this other option, this idea of synthesis, where organic life becomes also mechanic in a way, but in a true intellectual artificial sense. The geth are not considered true artificial intelligence. They are machines that are running on an operation, but with an organic hive mind. So synthesis takes that level to the next part. But is that what I'm really here to talk about in terms of video games? No, because we have lots of people who do representation of AI in video games, and while I can actually wax poetic on this subject all day long, I'm here to talk to you about essentially what AI is in the video game industry from a fiction standpoint, how we actually create fiction. Because currently, I base my research on what does the aspect of AI as a tool mean for us now. I'm very interested in media development, how we make stories, and technology is a part of that aspect. How do we make stories? Who do we make stories for? And what about the people who make the stories? When we looked at the film industry and television industry just recently in the last few years, we had the writer's strike. And one of the big issues that was discussed was the role of AI. Executives seeing this idea of AI being this, well, if AI can write stories for us, why do we need you? And that's exactly one of the real issues. In fact, Netflix conveniently released the latest season of Black Mirror, which any of us who are technologists absolutely watch that show. And the very first episode was about a quantum supercomputer that was busy creating Netflix stories for you, about you, of you. And if you haven't watched it, you really should, because when it comes to the ideas of image rights, voice rights, and where we could take ourselves in terms of story writing and story developing with AI, that's actually a very realistic reality right now. Voice actors are currently complaining about their voices being taken from them and used without their permission. And image rights have long been an issue. ABBA, anybody recognize ABBA, right? The famous Swedish pop group, by the way, have an AI-based sort of holographic concert hall that they have developed, which forever their image was sold for that, right? We've had the Tupac hologram as well, and now even Star Wars has previously used deceased actors in new movies with their image rights. But it's the question of what I should do with that. Disney actually tried to suggest we'll pay you $300, especially for extras. We'll pay you $300, come in one time, 2 hours, we'll record you, and we have you in perpetuity. They thought that was going to fly, and it didn't. The video game industry now is starting to develop the same questions that the film industry had when it comes to this. But what is interesting about the film industry versus the video game industry, AI has actually long been used in the video game industry, a lot longer than the film industry actually, right? So first we have to actually talk about what is AI? Artificial intelligence, yes, okay, but it refers to the development of computer systems that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. It doesn't say which human, because if it was me, we'd be in trouble. But some of the rest of you in the room maybe would be good, all right? So this is an understanding that we have natural languages, recognizing objects and patterns, and making decisions and solving problems. So for example, when we play video games, right, and we have the controller, in the great arcade room, there are actual directions of how to actually be able to use all the games. A part of a human intelligence is to be able to read those directions and to be able to connect written directions to the actual control systems and being able to use those. Patterns and things like that. When you feel hungry, what does that mean? And being able to make a sandwich, for example, right? That's minor things there. So AI is achieved through a combination of what we call machine learning. Many of you might have heard about this over the last several years as AI has been talked heavily about since ChatGPT, right? And our deep learning and natural language processing, among a whole bunch of other technologies. The one thing that I want to get to is that we actually have two various kinds of AI. Now, this is very broad. There's a lot of various AIs within these two, but typically we will categorize AI in two ways. A narrow or weak AI, which performs specific tasks, most prevalent. How many of you accessed your phones today? Right? Your smartphones? Let me just take mine out because I'm permanently attached to it. I don't have an addiction problem. I can quit anytime. What are you talking about, right? Simply just the process of now facial recognition or things like that is actually a form of AI. Right? There are a lot of processes on your own phone that are a form of artificial intelligence, but they are considered lower level or weak. Then we have what's considered general or strong AI, ability to perform any intellectual task that a human can. This is currently that's causing all the drama, right? Which is interesting because most of the drama only started once ChatGPT came around. There was drama previously, I'm not going to lie. But really, once someone plopped that ChatGPT out there and text generation became a mass medium accessible tool, that's the difference, right? AI has been accessible within industry for years, but when something moves from an industry specific aspect or even academic aspect to a mass medium aspect, that's when we lose the plot sometimes, because what have we fed the mass media, the mass people about artificial intelligence? Just go in that room, go look at Terminator. There you go. That's it, right? How many Skynet jokes have you heard about ChatGPT? Many of them funny, and it's, you know, some of them it's variably true. I can understand that, but at the same time, we have to really ask ourselves, though, are we really at that point? We're not. There actually are the real level concerns that we should have in terms of developing media. We're using this technology to make media. And people freaked out when they saw on Amazon.com that more than 3/4 of some of the book results were now generated books, which means that some people put in a little prompt, make me a storybook about a squirrel that, I don't know, really, really loves nuts, right? Or let's say this, how you're gonna make me a storybook about a squirrel who actually doesn't like nuts. Ooh, twist! All right, and ChatGPT will just spit it out for you in 5 seconds. I don't know about you, but I have to write things all the time for my job, and most of the times I'm like this. This is where we begin. Then I go and make a sandwich. Then I come back, right? Okay. Squirrel who doesn't actually like nuts. All right, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Right? Easily my writing process can take me anywhere from an hour to a day to get an idea out. When I have to write academic papers, please don't even come at me. It's even worse. It's much, much worse. And instead of going to make a sandwich, I just hit my head on the wall for a few hours and then we see what comes out. ChatGPT, then I put in the same prompt I might get for something and it just spits it out? Come on now. Of course it's tempting, and of course people have been using it, and it has bring up this big question about what then does human creativity mean for us if a machine can do this, right? If a machine can reach that level of creativity, but the big question is actually, can it? What does it mean for people who work in the industry? Both designers, because now we actually have AI that can even design images. It was one thing when we had ChatGPT, then DALL-E came on the scene. Mid-Journey, all of these other things, right? How many people saw the folks share that their little, oh, look at my profile picture from AI on Instagram? Any of you? How many of you are willing to admit you were one of those? It's all right. No, don't worry, we don't have to. We won't judge. I have a lot of artist friends, fan artists, and things like that, and there was a lot of discussion about that when that first came out in terms of copyright. Right? And what does it mean? It's one thing when we have the text. For text, for some reason, it's not as easy to identify. Ooh, yeah, obviously this is Austen, Pride and Prejudice. This is Jane Austen's writing for sure. That's a copyright issue. No. But when it came to the images, people could directly track pieces of images. Sometimes it would even have the signature of a person on the image. So it was easier to track than it was for writing, and this is why it's become a big issue. In the video game industry, we design things, create things. We are designing both images, music, voice, and we are writing. What does it mean we have to write these? So these are the things that I became obsessed with and asked myself, where does it all begin? How do we track back understanding AI? And we have to go back to the past in order to understand where we are in the present and where we might go in the future. So if we actually look at the past, AI in video games goes way, way back. If we go to 1952, now yes, NIM was actually previously 1952, but it was officially published in 1952. By the way, don't start this game. If you start this game, you will not stop. I was supposed to be working on this, and I'm going to be honest with you, earlier in the week, I got sidetracked for at least 2 hours remembering this game. I was like, oh my gosh. Now, the NIM is a very simple computational math game, actually, sort of kind of thing, but it's predictability aspects in there. And so you take, it's 2 ways that you can play the game is one, either the last person has to be the one to pull the last match, or the one person has to be the one not to pull the last match. And I will tell you, the computer wins almost every time, right? This wasn't just your basic logic-based game. There was a predictability model that had to be built into it. So this was considered our first, early AI conceptual game. Then after that, for some reason, we lent ourselves more to logic-based games, which don't necessarily require deep AI predictable thinking. It's based off of math versus actually predicting what you're going to do, how many things you might take or what not. So that's the difference between deep machine learning and lower level machine learning in terms of that. Then came the golden age of video games, and we saw this increased want and need for verisimilitude. We want things to feel real, and we are obsessed with it. It is why since the golden age of video games, graphics have continuously improved to the point that, they even released Mass Effect on 4K, and I was sitting there going, oh my gosh, Commander Shepard has never looked better in 4K. This is crazy. What? And we want this. Consumers actually want more realism in the video games because for some reason, this is what equates to immersion. This is what we've seen in our television and movie shows as well, this movement into realism. That cannot actually be maintained realistically. Right? You would need a programmer to sit with you pretty much live while you're playing, trying to code in for realism as you're going. So that is why AI was useful in that aspect. Also, when it came to single-player modes with different enemies. Right? We now had single-player modes, and you had different kinds of enemies coming in. This idea of how do we keep the game fresh? How do we keep it interesting? How do we keep it engaging? Well, we changed the enemies. We changed the difficulty levels, and that's what started happening. So single-player games were a big push for increased use of advanced AI. Then maze games, actually figuring out different mazes. AI would be able to look at a single-player behavior and then create new mazes for you. So there was this idea of being able to create replayability in a game, too, because obviously that's money. If a person only buys a game and they only play it once, that's only so much money you get off of it. The new model in media distribution and making is how much replayability is going to be in a game, right? So that's being designed into it. The problem is you have human beings that can only go to so far a point in design. So AI is something that can, through human coding and design, help with that process. Fighting mechanics then came in too, things like Street Fighter, games like that, which I absolutely love. Tekken, oh my gosh, don't get me started, okay? Point is though, the fighting styles, how to actually design them. How do you create graduated difficulty levels too? AI was a way that could program for that and those sorts of things. Sports games, this is very fascinating and interesting because I play sports, I do not play sports games. I know, right? Weird. But Madden football games were some of the earliest games that were using AI to develop a model system where a player could decide, I want this manager for my team, and they would see who the actual manager is, because these people were based off of real people. Your NPCs were actual, real existing managers and players who have already developed play styles and personalities, right? And so the AI would actually look at who you picked and be able to identify, ooh, this is this particular coach. They're known for being really brash, getting on the field, whatnot. And the AI would be used to help develop that into the actual play style and game, which made for a vast different type of combinations and replayability within the game. Also, a form of engagement and realism. It's this connection of somebody actually sees the person in real life, is able to play them in the game and say, oh my gosh, they are exactly the way they are that I see them in game. And that's how we use that. So, especially early AI in video games did not mean, however, actual artificial intelligence. In fact, a lot of video game developers themselves hate that we are using AI so flippantly and say that we're using it too much as a buzzword. It is AI in the sense of weak elements in terms of computational, and automation is really what they were looking at in that aspect of development. But we have gone a little bit further in terms of that. So AI in video games is about enhancing that player experience and things like that. Where have we gone in the present since the golden age? Predominantly now, increased responsive behavior from NPCs. Have any of you watched those TikTok videos of the people who do the GTA? Right? How many of you? Yeah, I've played that game. Oh, pardon me. Sorry, I'm just reconstructing. See, the NPC wouldn't even do that. The NPC wouldn't think to rearrange the furniture again and put it back nicely, right? You've seen what your Sims do, right? So it's that kind of thing. NPCs are these non-playable characters. They're supposed to be background, but they're what gives life to the game, actually, right? You, the player, you provide action and, well, within limits, right? But you provide playability, but the world around you is what actually gives life to the game. We hear this a lot, what gives a game soul. Many developers and writers will often talk about the soul of a game. And so NPCs became a big part of it. If NPCs weren't interesting or were glitchy all the time, people felt like they were suddenly outside of the game. Oh, it ruined the experience for me. So we became obsessed with developing NPCs as quote unquote more real. And that's a really key important factor. Everything needs to feel more real in that aspect. Then we had graduate gameplay, right? We can actually, based off of a different player's experience, if you're too good, I'm gonna make it harder. I'm sitting here going like, oh my God, those were my exams. I hated that. The LSAT exams today, most of them being computational, actually work like that. My sister had to do a massage therapy exam where they told them, listen, if you do too well, you're gonna get harder questions every time. And it's supposed to be this baseline error thing. For gameplay, it is fantastic because it means as a player, you consistently have to be on your toes, ready to go. I played Fear, which I don't know why I played it because I don't do well with horror. I have a very vivid imagination. Also, BioShock is one of my absolute favorite video games. I make it make sense, right? That game scared the living crap out of me because I could never just chill. Because depending on what kind of play style I did, it would register it and then it would try and thwart me. So I figured I could try and hide from everything. No. The computational AI system that they developed were like, okay, if the player is starting to hide from everybody, find them. And they would actually increase the enemy's ability to find you. That is not something that can be coded live at a time while you're playing. You would need an actual human being there to try and code that in. This is where AI becomes really useful in that. We have what's called procedural content generation, or ProcGen. So procedural content generation is algorithmically designed game worlds and levels. Think Minecraft. Borderlands, anybody Borderlands? The whole bazillion guns concept. It's really just a reskinning gun concept, but what they did is with procedural content generation, and you should be sitting there going like, ooh, generated content, isn't that what we call ChatGPT? And that's the thing where everybody is getting their hopes up, right? Everybody is getting all of everything in a twat because of generated elements, because AI previously could not generate something new. But that's exactly what ChatGPT does. ChatGPT generates something off of a prompt. ProcGen is not necessarily that same concept. It is that point there, but it is 1 point lower. It has to be fed from a specific database that they always have in video games. They will load it with pretextures that they've developed and things like that. And the idea is to redevelop something from ad infinitum from that only particular database, right? If it tried to get anything from the internet, and that is one thing that some people are now talking about. What would that mean in terms of for the ad infinitum kind of concept? It works for things like Minecraft, where you can, the AI redevelops new levels all the time. And sometimes, though, not with a lot of success. Sometimes they're really crappy levels. Borderlands, too. Sometimes you get really weird guns, and they also don't work really well. And the AI is like, okay, well, throw in another one, I'm just gonna churn it out. So we'll talk more about procedural content generation, but it has to be understood that it is AI, but it is lower level AI, right? What we do use AI for a lot, though, is pathfinding. This is where we actually map out a game. When you write a game, right, you have to have your story, right? A story that even games that are first-person shooters, like Valorant and Overwatch, they have lore to them, they have story for people like me who are obsessed with that kind of stuff, right? But the game still has to have a mechanic, it has to have a map. And you have to figure out how is character A going to get to area B, right? And then what are the NPCs going to do? They are all mapped out as well in development. So you have to write all of that out and then design for it. And an AI can actually help that. We find pathfinding is used in several different fields. In video games, we use it in order to map and actually develop planning and moving around the world. And then my favorite, though, decision trees. Yes. Now, this is very interesting because a lot of people feel like, oh, the options are so wide and varied. But if you think about it, as much as I love Mass Effect, and one of the ways in which they sold these video games from Mass Effect, Dragon Age, many of the BioWare-style RPG games is this idea of, we have so many different story endings. The way you play is going to change the story you are going to get. But if you think about it, it's only within as much as the devs could actually design all of these different path options. After that, however, whatever option you take, the AI in the game actually has to register that. So that is human AI working together. The humans design the concepts, the framework, and the AI then figures out, if you take this, what does that mean for all of the different pathways that we have structured it for, right? Where are you possibly going to end up if you try this? And there are people out there who they play these games specifically to try and break that. They try and see if they can break the internal AI to get there. So there's that. But decision trees are getting more and more complex. In fact, one of my favorite ones is one of the least favorite Mass Effect video games out there, which is Andromeda. Because not only did you now have decision skill trees that you could do where you just say yes or no, they actually added personality elements to it. So your character that you played, Ryder, whether the female or the male twin version, would develop, you could decide what kind of character you wanted them to become. Did you want them to become a complete jerk? Or did you want to become a really nice person? Right? Because, most of those soldiers are really nice, things like that. However you wanted to play, or if you wanted to shift around, too, right? Or if you wanted to play with the hearts of many of your crew members, you could do that too. What would that mean, though, for the end result of the game, as well as many other missions? Depending on what kind of personality you had would determine whether some crew members stayed with you or not. And so that changed a whole new thing that made a complexity to it. And some people love this because they felt that it really was more lifelike. That's the key, right? We want something that feels real, even if it's not based in our reality, because that is how we associate with media. That's how we make media, like science fiction, make sense for us. And so we have to think of these things, right? So Columbia Engineering wrote a really interesting thing here. Games aren't supposed to be unpredictable or unbeatable, which I find interesting because I think that's exactly where some consumers are, though. Some consumers really want to play unbeatable games for the sheer satisfaction of trying to beat them. I don't know if you can beat The Sims. I think The Sims beats you. But, it's that concept of some people want that in terms of that. But in general, though, our average consumer wants a video game that releases them from their reality for a little while, puts them within this game space, but is beatable. Because at the end of the day, we want to feel like we have achieved something, right? So even video games that play on forever, like Destiny 2 currently, right? However you feel about it. I don't know. Anybody see that trailer, though? Oh, no? Oh, man. I'm buzzing. So even that is a game that has been going on for ages with a lifelong storyline. But in between stories, you have to try and keep people interested. What do you develop? So the game is, in essence, unbeatable in that sense. However, the game has an end storyline where the Guardians do win. We know that because that would be really weird if we don't, right? So what about writing in video games, though? All of this, in terms of proc-gen and all of these elements, they focus heavily on the visual elements. Also music, by the way. But they focus heavily on visual design. So design, which is this interesting combination of art and science and math, is mostly considered the engineering of the actual game. So more of your computer science developments, things like that. If you want to make a game, you do that. But writing is a key aspect, too. What is the story behind your game? And this is where we have a lot of debates about generational AI and what generating AI is doing in terms of talent and what is happening to talent today. So, once again, it comes back to the NPCs, right? It's not just their actions, but what they say to you. Oh, I used to be an adventurer until I took an arrow in the knee. There we go, that one hit. Yes, okay, hang on, I gotta make a note. Keep that one for the future, right? All other things, right? Oh, I know you. I love it when I play Skyrim and I go through every single different town and every god would always say, oh, I know you, and be the exact same sound, the exact same everything. And after a while, it became super laughable. Absolutely laughable, and you're like, this isn't real. Also, how do you know me? I'm only infamous in 3 other y'all areas, not yours, right? And that was the problem that became with many games. NPCs are a requirement of video games. They help us add kind of verisimilitude, lifelikeness, and action. But at the same time, NPCs have become the butt of the joke for a lot of video games, right? They would be glitchy. They wouldn't say the things they want to, or repetitive. Some people became annoyed by the repetition of NPCs, but also the look of NPCs. Like, I saw this exact same NPC in the map where I was in another country, things like that, right? And the thing is, though, that was because there's a limit to dev production and things like that, and also software. Not all of these game studios have massive amounts of supercomputers just lying around, all right? The video games are already expensive as they are. Can you imagine if they now also included these amounts of supercomputers, which are very cool, by the way, right? And they'd be even more expensive. But would we get more diverse video games in terms of representation, in terms of different kinds of NPCs and voice lines? It's possible, and that's exactly what Alexis Roland at LaForge, which is part of Ubisoft, thinks about. So LaForge created Ghostwriter. And Ghostwriter is an actual generative text production that is made specifically for Ubisoft. But it goes further than just regular text. It goes further than ChatGPT. When it comes to writing for video games, sometimes you are writing a script. So I teach a lot of students who want to become writers for video games, and script writing is one of the things that we do. Right? It's like film in that essence. You are creating a story with script. What are your people saying? When are they saying it? But oftentimes when we're writing scripts, we can't just think about what you're saying. We have to think about how you're saying it. What is the body doing at that moment when you are saying it? Right? And it's one of these interesting things in terms of the writer has to think about how a game dev might translate the actual design of the character and what they can and cannot do. And it's one of the issues that we have now. Oftentimes writers are taught to write towards their medium. If you're writing towards film, write the action already as you want. When we have book authors right now who want to get into film, one of the advice points we give them is write your book as if it's already a movie screen. Write it so that an executive can actually see this play out on screen, which changes the type of writing. So Alexis Roland and his crew, they worked for years to develop this technology where that's exactly what it does. Not only does it spit out the speech, but it thinks, what will they look like when they actually do the speech? So it creates a visual image in terms of thinking of the speech and the style sample. For example, you could have someone say, "You're a jerk," and the style sample would be aggressive, right? And then they put that into the ghostwriter, and the ghostwriter would then generate not only an actual script out of that one thing, but it would generate a movement, an actual screen movement, which could then be sent to the devs immediately. Now, mind you, in terms of processing, in terms of design creation, this cuts the process down by half already. Just that one element, right? A lot of people, LaForge doesn't see this as problematic. They see it as an automation process. We're doing something that we are already doing. We are just finding ways to make it faster. But there are other groups that find it maybe a little bit more difficult. We'll get about that in a moment because I have to talk about where we might go from this, because someone took this one step further and said, well, what if we actually created a game that created NPCs at any moment and could take NPCs and make them part of the game at any moment? And that is exactly what Watchdog Legions did in 2020 when it came out with their play as anyone concept. The play as anyone concept, I'm gonna be honest with you, was mind-blowing for the time. The execution didn't end up very well. In terms of sales for all of the Watchdog series, they actually have never released how this game did sales-wise, and there's a reason for it. It didn't do as well as the other three, but Ubisoft really focused on this concept as a marketing gimmick, possibly. It worked for the moment, but what it really does show is where the technology could go. Because if this is what it's like and it's finicky still at this point, it's crazy to think what it's going to be like when generational AI is actually going to be at an even more advanced stage in 10, 15 years, which is exactly what a lot of devs are talking about. So the whole idea of Watchdog Legions is you have NPCs that walk around you. You're trying to bring down a fascist government, right? And you're a hacker. So you have all of these different NPCs. And anybody who's part of or sympathetic to your order, you can recruit. And you can recruit them. At the moment that that NPC becomes recruited, they are what they call up-resed. It's just another fancy word for saying upgraded from a regular NPC to a mission-critical specific NPC. And you could do that with hundreds of NPCs. And the AI would be designing NPCs on the fly. And so you register that. That means they're designing NPCs in real time. Right? Remember I told you how you need a human being in there to actually try and code that at a moment? And by the way, that takes months. They said, no, we want the AI to do that. So it took them almost 10 years. By the way, there's a video game still in development in 10 years that is trying to do this exact concept at a more extreme level. Nobody has heard anything yet about it, but it's there. But they decided to go ahead and go for it. So what they did is they created what they called the census. It's not our census, but it's a funny way of putting it because it's exactly what it does. They looked at census data in terms of gender, age, ethnicity, fashion, occupation, income, personality, voice, birthplace, and more, and put it into a database, right? And then what would happen is you would have all of these different things. Depending depending on the NPC that a player would choose, the AI would already identify certain things about that NPC and start to predict how you play and what kind of things you learn, what kind of other NPCs it could design and create in terms of that, and create different background stories for them. It would create timelines for them. And essentially what the devs wanted was, if this timeline existed, if you weren't with them at that time in the game, they would be doing that thing. So if, NPC 1 was going to have lunch with their mother at 1 o'clock on the other side of London, they were actually going to go have lunch on the other side of town with their mother in London. And the reason for that, so that at any point in time you want to take one of your NPCs, because the point was you could collect hundreds of these NPCs towards your goal, you want to go find them at any point in time, you could. And that took a huge amount of computational AI and advanced AI to be able to register predictive behaviors of the player, you, who could change things at any time. Right? Players also decided to try and change play styles randomly in the middle to see what would happen. And the AI would have to try and keep up. Now, this was advanced, and it was incredible. The concept was interesting. In terms of replayability factor, this is fascinating in terms of character development, whatnot. But there was a concern in terms of representation, character representation, and implicit bias. If you picked a lawyer, and that lawyer, for example, was white, then what they found was the predictability model would tend to lean to a bias towards every lawyer is white. Or, particularly, they would start to match in many of their background elements, right? It's this implicit bias. Oftentimes, if I said, think about a doctor, right? It's always that fun social experiment. Think about a doctor, and then you go around the room, and you find many people have thought of a man. Granted, we'd say that maybe in this generation we have changed. The problem is that AI is still based off of many of these implicit models and biases that are still in place, right? We look at ChatGPT. ChatGPT is infamous for implicit bias and also just hallucinating things, right? And so that's one of the issues they had too. The AI would start to hallucinate things and start changing things, and then of course bleed over. There was some mutant NPCs developing too, which I find a fascinating concept though, to be honest. I played Assassin's Creed when they first, you know the one I'm talking about, right? Where they dropped it and it was just skeletons, and I thought, you know what, I'd play this game. Interesting. But that was one of the problems that we have in terms of that. And so that is taking ProcGen to the next level. That is taking ProcGen from just a mostly procedural AI mechanic element to we really want something to be generating organically, right? The way that humans do. And Dr. Kate Compton is phenomenal. She does incredible work in terms of actually making and looking at AI and art and considering what is human creativity. Because what's the whole point of this? What is the interesting element of this? Well, it's human jobs actually at stake. Because if this technology gets to a point that a game can be created and generated organically on the fly in terms of story, because by the way, this would also generate mission quests. It would generate random mission quests that the devs had not designed, that the writers did not write, right? Now, they were not mission critical. They were all side quests, but can you imagine? You know someone sitting there going, at what point can I get this thing just to write the whole game for me? And that is probably that executive in there. You can tell my bias about most of the executives out there. There's some good ones out there, but a lot of executives have very different perspectives about success and models of success and what makes a good game versus consumers and also designers and writers, right? That's one of the issues that we have in communicating these differences. So Dr. Kate Compton says one of the issues that we have with ProcGen is procedural oatmeal. Right? After a while, you're actually going to get the same things over and over and over again. They're just going to look slightly different. But that is what's going to happen. When we look at No Man's Sky, which was incredible because it took ProcGen to this level of we can create thousands of worlds out of all of these different maps and things like that. The problem is a lot of gamers after a while said, well, a lot of these worlds are slightly different, but they're starting to feel a lot like the same. And that's the problem with oatmeal. I love oatmeal. Procedural oatmeal, right? Another thing we have is the GIA or generative AI NPCs can end up hijacking the narrative. Because an AI is trying to create things and generate scripts that were not designed ahead of time, sometimes an NPC would say something that was either not part of that world, did not relate to the actual content of the game itself or the genre, or would say something incredibly, yeah, that's right, racist. So they had that problem also in Watchdog Legions early in terms of some NPCs saying things that they're like, where the heck did it come up with this? What? Right? Because it's generating from all of these random things that it sometimes doesn't register the contextual element of it. That's one of the issues that we have with ChatGPT. I always have to look through stuff with ChatGPT because it's very bad at context. So you have to do that. And then, of course, the big question, value of labor. Is AI taking jobs? We hear that from everything. The media entertainment industry for film and television brought up this question. Video games is next on the chopping block in terms of this, especially in terms of the latest firing masses that we've had going on in terms of that. It is this question of what role and relationship will AI have in creating our media, and what does that mean for the people who are working in those industries, right? Dr. Kate Compton is saying she's not against AI, and quite frankly, neither am I. It's a matter of understanding, though, the limit of the tool and how far it should go versus how far it can go. Those are two very different questions in relationship to the industry that we are in. And very big questions in terms of what does that mean for how we value a job. Currently, one of the things we see too is writers, for example, getting fired, and then we have AI writers who are coming in. And these are still humans, but they're expected just to generate prompts. You become a prompt engineer, essentially, right? And what we have found is there is a devaluation of writing as a skill. So that person that might have gotten a different amount, if they were just a writer, has actually gotten less now because they are AI writer, because they see AI as doing some of the job, when in fact what AI is doing is automation. That is the process that Compton really looks at in terms of that, and that many devs and also writers are looking at. In terms of AI replacing us entirely, some people just do not feel that's going to be possible. So for example, I forgot to put it in there, but the creator of Dragon Age Origins, when a small video game called Smallville came out, which is supposed to be completely AI designed, 20 or so little villages in a town with completely generated text, completely generated imagery, and a lot of people played it, and the one corner of the stone that kept coming up was, it just feels like it doesn't have a lot of soul. And that's one of the things that he came to in terms of saying, we see this oftentimes when we have automations creating things, there's this lack of soul. Which is a bigger question then in terms of what does that mean for us as humans, and what is a soul, and what AI can or cannot do or replicate for us in the creation of our content, like video games, movies, TV shows, music, and even more. And there we go for thank you, with time for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? That was a lot of amazing content to try and cipher through.
Hi, my name is Lance. I graduated from KSU, so same school.
Hey, welcome, Lance.
I had a question. You mentioned graduated gameplay and gave Fear as an example, but I naturally thought of the director from Left 4 Dead. So is that like the similar time period? And would you say that as a concept, that was one of the first examples, or were there any previous examples of graduated gameplay?
Actually, even earlier, right, all the way up until the 70s. So we've seen AI being used since the 1950s, really. Then there was a bit of a slowdown. So Pong, for example, Pong is not AI. Pong is completely computational. It's math. In terms of graduated difficulty, it is designed that at a certain point in time, that little ball is going to go faster. That is not the AI deciding, ooh, this player is doing really well. Let's speed things up on them, right? It would be interesting to see an AI Pong now. I bet that would be an insane game. Absolutely. Can you think of the things that it would just throw at you all of a sudden? Actually, that would not be bad, but in any case. And so there was a little break where we mostly had video games that were then just mechanical, computational, and then 70s, we saw a lot of different games. So the early Street Fighter games, and also single-player games like Star Trek, actually some of the earlier Star Trek games, those were considered graduated difficulty. What was interesting is when we moved from those to strategy-based games. Do you ever play StarCraft or things like that? I was big into StarCraft. Oh my gosh, let me tell you. AI really struggled with those games because there were so many different factors that a player had to keep in mind, from economy to different types of bases being made at one time at different sites of the map, to different enemies appearing at any one time. And there was so many different variations in play styles as well, that for some reason during that 80s time, like 80s, 90s, the strategy-based games had a hard time getting that. And then we moved to first-player shooter games and things like that, which lend themselves very well to AI elements, things like that. So there are first or earlier games, but then there becomes an overlap because a lot of these companies were using AI at the same time, right? So Fear is just one example, but yes, Left 4 Dead 2, Left 4 Dead, great examples, and you will find earlier examples as well, right? So that's a great question.
Anybody else?
Hi, that was a really cool talk. My name's Ben. I'm a PhD candidate at UGA studying organizational psychology. So
Awesome.
issues related to work and the workplace and labor are often top of mind for me.
My dad's a psychologist and my mom's a clinical social worker, so
wow.
that explains a lot.
Small world, yeah. I was wondering if you could speak to the role of labor unions and worker unions as sort of operating as this buffer of, for worker protection as far as, executives wanting to come in and sort of automate everything with these tools.
Yeah, well, one of the issues that we actually have right now in the video game industry is that there isn't as much unionization as there is currently in other entertainment media industries, like, for example, TV and film, right? In fact, voice actors as well have an issue in terms of they really aren't actually in unions. So that entire strike movement actually gave a lot of impetus for people in the video game industry to start unionizing at a level. So video game animators, for example, just came together and formed successful unions in certain regions, which is very important. I know some people have unions can be a complicated thing, right? But in terms of, I'm trying to be very careful in terms of this, right? Because I have a bias that thinks network executives do think differently from other people. We just have to look at what, the CEO of Disney said during the strike about these people, right? It shows that they're on a very different level. And so that shows that we do need third parties or different groups that can vouch for their people at the same time while they're working within an industry for different companies. So they're very important in terms of that. One of the issues we have, though, in terms of is actually unionizing. We saw it with Starbucks. Once people tried to unionize, Starbucks would union bust, right? Just push people out. And the thing is, there are people who would want work in the industry and cross the picket line. So that develop of unionizing is going to be very interesting to see. Voice actors have been talking about it quite vocally now, and a lot of video game devs and artists, especially writers. Writers, I think, will have a bit of an easier time because they translate very well to TV and film. That's not to say it's still easy, but there can be something. The issue is you're going to have different union groups for different groups. Animators to actual engineers, to the actual writers, to the artists, to the voice actors, to music producers. All of those will have to have their own particular groups because the way AI works in their particular element might not be the same. That's one of the issues that we have where you can't just create one single union because it has to be developed. And by the way, the entire organization for the strike group, they ended up not being incredibly happy in any case with that result. The end result for making a deal with the executives is being a little criticized after the fact of being too fast of an agreement. The AI deal gives some protections, but not nearly as much as people were hoping for. So it will be a continued fight. I think all it was a stopgap point for right now in terms of people need to get back to work. They want to get back to work. We need at least something, but I would not be surprised if in the next contract period, this is going to come up as a major point, not just for writers in TV, film, and also camera producers, makeup artists as well, and things like that. But then we're going to see the video game industry follow very close after that. So the next 5 to 10 years is going to be a fascinating thing to look at in terms of industry and what that means for the way that the video game industry is developed, first of all. There's a lot of unhappiness right now with the mass layoffs and the fact that we are now seeing there wasn't a lot of protection even prior to AI as a thing, right? So that's what we're going to see in terms of that. More role for organizational psychologists, that's for sure, to come on in.
Anyone else? I love how you thought about the makeup artists. I hadn't thought about makeup artists, but with all the filtering, AI could take care of that.
If
too.
we can do it, if the AI can produce something just as well as you would with realistic prosthetics and things like that, then it's going to be at a point if someone's going to say, why do I need a makeup artist if it gets to be the same point? But thankfully, we do have a lot of, and it's even in video game industry, the mocap artists right now. Fun fact, by the way, Jet Li with The Matrix did not actually want to sign up because Microsoft was doing the motion capture. That's why he actually decided not to sign up. He was worried about what they would do with his motions after they had it in mocap. That was The Matrix days. And so there are big concerns in terms of if they have makeup and they can copy that, then would you need them? But once again, it comes back to realism. A lot of people are saying that realistic prosthetics lend themselves to some sort of, there's this element, once again, it comes back to it just has some soul to it. We hear that a lot, and I really want to push it in terms of what do we mean when we say that? There's something there about that versus computer-generated content.
Definitely. Wow. Any other questions? There's a lot to take in. There's a lot to think about. Please help me thank our speaker today. Wonderful job.
Thank you so much. And if you ever want to reach out to me, please feel free. I have an Instagram and an X, formerly known as Twitter. I'm getting more active there again. And I have my email as well, eventer at eventer1. I don't know who the first eventer is. I'm pretty sure they're generated AI. I'm trying to find them. But I am eventer1 apparently at Kennesaw.edu. Please feel free to reach out to me for anything. We're always looking to work with people in industry or whatnot. And even if you just have questions and want to learn something, I love having chats with people about anything and sitting and learning from you too.
Thank you so much. Just a reminder, next month is Jurassic Day, so May the 19th? 18th, I was so close. So we have the book club that will be meeting at 2 o'clock. We have the paleontologist coming in to speak at 3:30, and then Aurora Theater will be showing the movie as well. So make a dinosaur day out of it. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate it. And TECH-Splore is still happening. We'll be opening the garage doors again soon.